This is what we're going to be working on today. We are practicing our IK setup. Now, this is not the real setup that you would use on a character, as you'll see later in the course. This is just the IK mechanism portion of it. We are going to practice setting this up on a simple example so that it's much easier for us to handle when we have more bones in our setup later on. But in the process of learning about this IK constraint, we're going to practice some of the tools that we've learned about already, like snapping and subdividing our bones, as well as we're only going to create one side of this rig and have the computer symmetrize that across to the other side, because no one wants to work harder than they need to. All right, it's going to be fun. Let's go. Let's set up our IK mechanism. This is just a practice. This wouldn't be how you would really do it on the rig. It's just the mechanism of how the IK system works. We're going to make a few mistakes on this one, and before we do it for real on our character later. At the moment, I'm in the front orthographic view. I'm going to hit numpad 3, jump to the right orthographic view, and that way I'm looking at the side of the character. All right, so I'm going to position my bones. I'll do that in edit mode, and then I'm just going to drag this one up, and I'm constraining it on the Z axis. So I can do that by hitting G and then pressing Z to constrain it, or hitting G and then while you're moving in the Z, push the middle mouse button, and that will do the same thing. I'm just going to position it kind of up there. I'm going to practice a few methods. So I want to get this tail of our bone back to where our cursor is. So I'm going to just use snapping for that. So I'm going to hit Shift S with the tail selected, and then choose selection to cursor. And that is because our cursor was already at the point where I wanted to snap it to. Boom, now our bone is in that direction. I'll just turn on my axes so you can see the axes of our bone now. And I'm also going to subdivide this. I push W to bring that up, but by default it is right click, and then choose subdivide. And we only need to subdivide once, but because this is going to be an IK chain, there's something we need to do to this knee joint here. I'll give you a second to think. What is it? That's right, we need to create a little bit of a bend in it so that the computer knows which way to. We can't have a straight IK chain. It's going to cause us lots of problems. And that is our main leg bones. Now I'm going to extrude from here. So I'm just going to hit E to extrude and then constrain with the middle mouse as I'm moving screen left. And my foot, I'm just going to make it about that big. When I extruded that, it's created that as a connected child-parent relationship. I actually want to clear that because this foot bone is going to be a target for the IK chain, and the target can't be a child of the chain, otherwise we'll get a dependency cycle. So I'm going to clear that parent now with Alt-P and then choose clear parent, and that has solved that problem. And then I want to get a knee pole kind of out here. So I'm going to duplicate our foot bone, which doesn't have a parent at the moment. And I actually want to put it in line, in perfect line with the knee here, like the same height as our knee joint. So I'm actually going to use a different snapping tool. I'll change our snapping method over to vertex. That way we can snap to the heads or the tails of our bones. But I want it to remain over here. I don't want it to snap in that direction. Well, we can snap on a particular axis, which is awesome. So I'm going to hit G to activate my snapping, and then I'm going to hit Z to constrain it to the Z axis. And now when I hold control and do my snapping, it's only going to snap the Z. And now this bone is at the same height as our knee joint. And our IK mechanism is going to work a little bit easier if our knee pole bone is parented to the foot. So I'm going to just select them in that order. Who's your daddy? I am. And now I'm ready to name all of our bones. So I'll select this guy. He's going to be thigh. And make sure we put a .L on all of these bones. This is going to be shin.L, and this is going to be foot.L. Over here, this is going to be our knee pole. So we're going to go knee_pole.L. All right, time for our constraints. Here's another little bit of a quiz for you. Which one of these modes do we add our constraints in? Correct, pose mode. Now we want to add the IK constraint to the last bone in the chain, which happens to be the shin here. And our target is going to be the foot. So we select our target first, then we select our shin, and we go Control-Shift-C and choose inverse kinematics. Now this will technically work. We can move it around, but you'll see there's some weird flipping that happens. So we can actually add more control over here. The first thing I want you to get into the habit of doing is setting the chain length to be the exact value that you want. By default, it is 0, so it's going to run up the hierarchy as high as it can. In this particular setup, it's not going to cause us any issues because it can only run up to the point where we want it to. However, in a full rig, it's going to run up the hierarchy and it'll run all the way to the spine. And when you move your foot, the whole spine's going to move, and we don't want that. So we want to limit it to the exact length, which is just 2. And now to get this knee pole to actually control the direction of our knee, we need to fill out this pole target here. So we actually want the same object in here, so we can click in here and choose armature. But sometimes when you have lots of objects, it's just easier to hover over here and hit Control C and then paste that value here. That's often the fastest way of doing it. Now we need to tell it what bone is our pole vector. So we're going to choose knee pole, and that should instantly start working. However, our knee is flipped. We'll fix that in a moment. So if we move this around, it is rotating the leg. But why did it flip? And that is because the IK constraint will always try and point the X-axis to our target here. So there's 2 ways that we can fix that. We can actually rotate it in edit mode, or we can edit the constraint. In this case, I'm going to edit the constraint. So I want to change the pole angle, just drag it one direction and go, okay, we want it to be -90 degrees. And now when I jump into edit mode and pose mode, it's going to stay in the same spot. And that is because we're offsetting our X-axis by -90 degrees, and that is pointing our knee in the right direction. So the 2 more things I want to do, and that is to set up the stretching so that our foot doesn't dislocate, and also mirror this from one side across to the other. I'm going to set up the stretching now. So we can do that by selecting our bones. Then going over to the bone tab, and under the inverse kinematics, we want to change this stretch value. Now I selected both of them at the same time so that I can just hold down Alt and click in here and then type, we don't need a high number, 0.1 will be enough in our situation. And then we can stretch, and you'll notice that it has changed both of those bones at once. The next step is to mirror all of our work across to the other side, because no one wants to work harder than they need to. So I'm actually going to move all of my bones in edit mode. So make sure I select everything. And then I'm just going to drag them kind of where a foot would be. If this is the middle of the character, then our left would be on screen right. And then I can mirror this across, or symmetrize this across, by bringing up the context menu. That is W for me, but right click for you. And then just choosing symmetrize. Boom. And now all of our work has been copied across to the other side. That's what I want you to practice for this lesson. I want to reiterate though that when we do this on our real character, these are going to be mechanism bones. So this is actually the same mechanism that we're going to use, but our naming convention is going to be different, and we're going to have a few different bones. We'll have control bones, we'll have deformation bones, and we'll have these mechanism bones. But it's important to practice this setup first so that we don't make any mistakes when we've got triple the amount of bones. All right, good luck. I look forward to seeing your work.